Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Ayesah Uy Abu-Bakar and we will continue our topic on the module on transforming conflict. And today we are very lucky that we have a special speaker to discuss with us this topic on the participation of women in peace processes. Let me quickly introduce her. Okay. Her name is Miss Teresita Quinton-Deles, and she's from the Philippines, but she is well known as Ging. Ging was the presidential advisor on the peace process in the Philippines during the period of 2003 and 2000 up to 2005, and her second term was in 2010 and 2016. She was also the first Philippine representative to the Governing Council of the ASEAN Institute on Peace and Reconciliation Commission and one of the Philippine representatives to the ASEAN Women Peace Registry from 2018 up to present. After her involvement in the Philippine peace process, Ging was appointed as senior mediation advisor in the UN standby mediation team in 2017 to 2018. And more recently, she is a member of the International Commission on Inclusive Peace that was launched in December 2020. And they will be producing a global peace agenda, or what they call as Principles for Peace, to be completed in 2023. Her other involvement in the international community includes her participation in the Center for Democratic Control of Armed Forces based in Geneva. And she has also been a longtime member of the Club de Madrid's network of political leaders united to support shared societies. In the past, Ging was an expert member of the UN Commission on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or UNCEDAW. And during that time, she was also elected as the Commission Rapporteur in 1993 up to 1994. So I'd like now to welcome our speaker, Ging. Thank you for accepting our invitation to speak to our students in this module.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here.
Okay. To quickly start our interview, just to give a little bit of background about the achievements of Ging during the time that she was the secretary of the office of the presidential advisor on the peace process, because this is really the time that the government of the Philippines and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front reached many achievements, such as the signing of the peace agreements, the framework of agreement on the Bangsamoro, and the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. And it was this negotiation that made the Philippines well known in having a female chair of the government peace panel, and of course, with her leadership as the secretary of OPAPP, and the participation of women members in the MILF peace panel technical working group. And also during this time, in her leadership, the Philippines came up with a WPS agenda, and this has been institutionalized with its Philippine National Action Plan. So the first question that we'd like to find out is that with all the experience and the involvement of Ging, we would like to know, Ging, what do you think about the current situation internationally and in the region in ASEAN when we talk about the involvement of women in conflict and peace processes?
All right. Well, first of all, we have to say that the situation of armed conflict globally is not good. That there are so many reversals in peace processes. In fact, it is said that peace agreements, most peace agreements have not lasted beyond 7 years, and that's precisely what the International Commission on Inclusive Peace that I have joined is trying to look at, is to examine what has not worked, what has gone wrong. And part of what has gone wrong, I believe, is the absence of women. or particularly in official peace processes. Women are there on the ground because, well, they keep up the communities. No? They are especially in crisis. The ones who are there who maintain families and communities. But when it gets to formal peace processes, then they disappear, and that is really even if the UN Security Council resolution was passed already 22 years ago. It was in 2000 when that was adopted by the Security Council. In terms of implementation, it has been weak. The fact that you need even in the UN a special advisor on women and inclusion means that this is an agenda that has not been fully mainstreamed and really needs to get pushed. And that is why the Philippines having Miriam Coronel Ferrer, who was our chief negotiator in the signing of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, was the first woman. That's in 2014. Was the first woman to sign a major peace agreement on behalf of a conflict party. There have been women mediators before, but to be the signatory on behalf of a conflict party. That was the first time, and it was hailed by women advocates worldwide because it happened so rarely. And part of the achievement there is that behind the scene, practically the head of the legal team, the head of the secretariat, most of the heads of the technical working groups that worked on the agenda, that those were women. But that still needs to be constantly pushed. Women disappear. Women disappear when it gets into the formal processes. There are more and more women's networks that are pushing the agenda. There are more and more women who are, well, sometimes doing what is called a women's peace table. But there's still a lot more work to make sure that all that work actually gets on the table, actually becomes part of the decisions that are made by states and armed parties.
Okay. How about in ASEAN? What is your observation? Where are we now in ASEAN?
Well, one of our problems, of course, is that ASEAN itself is not inclined to get very much involved in the resolution of the conflict, of the crisis, of the crisis that are happening in different parts of ASEAN because of the policy of non-interference. But these issues need to be discussed as ASEAN. They affect the solidarity of ASEAN. They affect the actual welfare of lives of people in the ASEAN. So first is that there needs to be a platform which is not which is seen as a platform where these issues can be discussed, and not just by states but by the citizens, by the ones most affected. That needs to be done, and this needs the other thing is that in the discussion of these issues, yes, it is still hard. ASEAN is still very male. ASEAN is still very male dominated. There were in 2020, being the anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, a lot of fora that were done on WPS. But when you looked at the speakers, few ASEAN women were ever speaking. It
That's
was
true.
men, and that if there were women speaking, they were mostly from international organizations or other countries outside of ASEAN. OPAPP was a good initiative, of course. But even that, as you will know, that needed a struggle to finally define what could be acceptable across all countries, and that was to have a registry, a listing of women that could provide resources for peace building and peacemaking. But OPAPP itself still needs to find its role and its entry into actual decision making in ASEAN. In light of that problem, I think we need to work more on getting people-to-people conversations across countries. That while the states themselves may still have problems and would still have the sensitivities of discerning what constitutes interference or what constitutes actual concern to try to learn and try to help about problems of other countries, is that we need to make the voices of citizens grow, both nationally and across borders, so that we can push, and I'm particularly speaking here for women, push our agenda, push our concerns, so that the states will decide to take this up and take this up across borders.
Okay. Now let's go back to the Philippine experience. I'm sure you have a lot of interesting stories to tell us, or anecdotes, on how the Philippine process, the peace process of the Philippines was really successful enough to bring the women's issues and women's role at the forefront. Do you have any stories for us?
Well, first of all, to say it was a long process. What we would call the Philippine Peace Movement actually started in 1986, after we threw out the dictator Marcos, and realized he had left behind a legacy of armed conflicts on several fronts, including the secessionist movement in the south, in Muslim Mindanao. And then it was there that citizens said, hey, we need to call for peace. And that in the first peace talks, in the first 100 days, when President Cory Aquino took very important, major initiatives towards peace, then citizens said, well, what is clear is that you cannot leave the peace table just to the combatants. The unarmed citizens also, for whom both parties said that they were fighting for, should be part of that table. We have a large stake here. And as the peace movement was developing, it began to show that women who were most faithful to the movement, because it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be fast. There were many problems, and so who were the ones who kept on pushing? Who were the ones who were always there? To the point where well-known sociologist Andy David, who was one of the first to be part of the Coalition for Peace, said at one point, I come to the meetings because I know Ging and Karen are there, and they're always there, and I'm embarrassed that if we don't show up, yeah. And we would push it. We began to work on agenda for peace. We looked at peace processes. We began to be very creative, in fact, in the roles that citizens could play, including shuttling between the parties. But this was all in unofficial processes. When the agreement between government and the MNLF was signed, the final peace agreement in 1996, if you look at that picture of the signing, not one woman on the table, including the secretariat that was passing the papers. to be signed, they were all men. So that was already 1986 to 1996. So that was really an agenda. And I would say that it was a major milestone when I was first appointed as a presidential advisor in the peace process, the first woman to head the office that in the Philippine government focuses exclusively on looking at our different processes for ending armed conflict. All my predecessors were male and mostly coming from a security background. So I was the first woman and the first without a security, not coming from the security background, but was in fact coming from civil society advocacy. I think it's important to note that happened under a woman president. I mean, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo was never, I would not say was a feminist, although she's a strong woman in her way. But being a woman, she could look at women and see that, yeah, this woman can take this role. And I think that's an important thing. An appointment of woman, it's not enough, but it is often an important first step, because women know other women. Women know what women have been doing work in what fields. So when you're when a woman is in a position and there are other positions to be filled up and there's other work to be done, women know more women than men do about other women who can take on the task. In my first stint, that move was not very, it was still weak. And partly other things needed to happen. First, a more mainstreaming of the concept of human security, helped to broaden the idea, so that even the military, by the time I came back to government in 2000, even the military was thinking of security sector reform, and security sector reform including women in the security sector. And that human security, therefore, in peace processes on the peace table, it was clear you weren't just talking about a military solution. If human security was what our aim was, then we needed to talk about food security as well. We needed to talk about what happens when there is a armed hostilities on the ground. What happens to those who are displaced? That became part of it. It became a broader view of what real peace and security means, and that there are other areas that need to be talked about. And then you begin to see women. You begin to see that, in fact, women can take on these roles. And women did. I will have to say that in the Philippine peace process, our first chief negotiator, who later became appointed Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Marvic Leonen, had an important part in getting more and young women working on the peace process, because he was a faculty member at the College of Law, and he saw all of these bright young women in the College of Law. And when he was chief negotiator, he invited them to be part of the secretariat, to head the legal office.
So that means men have to carry, women.
Also, yes. And there are, the point is, there are men who are like that, but not enough. Definitely not enough. And so that was important. And when he was appointed, one story, when he was appointed, the President Aquino was thinking of appointing him to the Supreme Court. And one of the issues that President Aquino was dealing with was who was going to replace Marvick. And Marvick and I were both nominating Miriam. Yeah. And the president said, Ging, I don't have a problem with women, but the other side that you're talking to is Muslim, and they may have a problem that your chief negotiator is a woman. Fortunately, the MILF had by then also put out a statement saying that they will have no problem with whoever government puts to talk to them. That for them, that is, their job was to take care of their side. They would not oppose whoever government wanted to put on the other side. So the president made a consensus among his advisors, and many of them were men, and they all agreed. Okay. They all agreed Miriam should be the one, and so Miriam was appointed, and well, the rest of that is her story.
Yeah. So that's a good trivia. The other party also agreeing to have a negotiator.
Yes, they said that would not be a problem. But my favorite story, let me just end with this. My favorite story of this peace process is, of course, how difficult it was in the first document that was signed. That was the 10 points of decision, 10 common points of decision, which paved the way for the framework agreement. It was major principles that the two parties agreed upon. It was a summary, and the government was pushing on the agenda of women's meaningful participation in the peace process. That took many hours. If all of the decision points that took the longest to be accepted. But part of that story is that while they were discussing this, Valentine's Day happened. And so there were many women on the government side. On Valentine's Day, they bought chocolates, heart-shaped chocolates from the hotel shop. And when they entered the room, they brought the chocolates and offered it to the MILF men. And they were caught quite off guard. Of course, they had to accept them. But that broke. It's a favorite part of our story. That in a way broke the ice. People began to see things maybe important provision that got accepted within that day.
Okay.
And we like to tell that story because it also shows how women work. That sometimes not. The discussion on the peace table is very political, but in the end, we're people. And in the end, we have to be able to reach to the human side of the other side and to hit the human side inside of us that will reach the human side of the other side. And in a way, the story of the chocolate hearts was one way of doing that, to say that, yeah, we're on different positions politically on many ways. But in the end, let's look at what we are as people.
So that's a good advice for those who want to become mediators and negotiators. Okay, so we'll end this session here.
Baba mo siya.